It's a gorgeous day here at Flock. It's almost cloudless in the sky, so it's beautiful. At night, it's nice and cool, and we've had pretty good rain here. And I thought we would give you a tour of our veggie garden. Now, keep in mind, our veggie garden is probably the smallest gardens that we have here, and we haven't really paid much attention to them. And I would say there's a couple of reasons for that. One is when we first got to this land, maybe 4 years ago now, we really wanted to concentrate on the things that we could do that had the biggest impact on the land. And a lot of our concentration has been on just restoring and rehabilitating the land, focusing on wildlife gardens, wildlife corridors, things of that nature. And you know, the meadow was actually the first project that we did, so you could see that off in the distance. It's actually in the 31st month since having seeded that meadow, and it's starting to look extremely lush. All the echinacea is up this year. We have some beautiful gray-headed coneflowers and Monarda fistulosa and a number of others that are popping up that really didn't pop up in the first 1 or 2 years. We had some echinacea, but not that much. Now we have like thousands of it, so it's pretty awesome. And the other reason why we didn't concentrate on the veggie garden and growing veggies and stuff for ourselves is because we knew we wanted to create a greenhouse off the side of the barn and also some of the major raised beds in front of the barn, but we're renovating the barn, and it wouldn't have made sense to actually put a greenhouse on a barn that's not renovated yet, nor would it make sense to actually put raised beds in front of the barn where we needed that space in order to have the lift and to mobilize the lift around that area. So we actually, unfortunately, had to push it off. That being said, we did plant some of our longer term veggies and fruits. So in the orchard, we did an orchard tour recently, I would say about a month ago, and we have a lot of our orchard crops. So like these are fruits and nuts that take a much longer time to establish, and a lot of our herbs and some veggies in there, but not like a pure veggie garden. And then over here, if you recall, maybe it was a year and a half, 2 years ago, that we planted 2 raised beds here. We built these raised beds. In front of what will become the chicken coop, right now it's my diamond dove coop, and we have to renovate this as well. But we figured let's do this because some of those longer term crops were asparagus, and I wanted to put them in raised beds because asparagus, from my experience of growing it when as a child, my parents were growing asparagus and we planted it in the yard, and my golly, it will take over the yard, and it just exists and spreads like crazy. So my idea was to actually plant the real spreading beastly plants like you could see here. This you may not recognize unless you're a medicinal junkie, and this is elecampane, which is Inula helenium, I believe. And this is a plant that you typically would use the root of, but as you could see from its iconic flower and inflorescence, this is in the Asteraceae family. Actually, when I look at this part looks so much like the gumweed, minus the sticky marshmallowy nature of it, but obviously the gumweed is in the same family. If you recall, I showcased gumweed, which is also another great medicinal for respiratory health. This one is a great respiratory herb. We have elecampane and honey, which is very good if you have a scratchy, dry throat, dry cough. This is a perfect plant for that, but you can see it's a beast. So I chose to plant this in the back with the asparagus. Some of the asparagus looks like it got broken, it could be cut back. And I came in here earlier in the year and topped it off with some of the espoma compost, largely because when I built these raised beds, you know, all that kind of compost and soil, it starts to compact, and, you know, obviously over time you need to kind of refill the beds. But over here, you'll see that I planted some slightly different plants. You could see that I have also the asparagus in here. Now that is south facing and this is east facing. And this just goes to show you how much smaller the asparagus is over here. And what I like about that we planted it in two different places is that we got a pretty good crop of asparagus this year. We planted 2-year roots, if you recall, back in the day. So typically after 3, 4, 5 years, that's when your asparagus is really producing. So I collected some this year, but I'm still only collecting little bits so that we could really focus on getting a better asparagus crop in the next 2 to 3 years. But like I said, we wanted to concentrate on these perennial vegetables that grow year over year, that will produce year over year. Now, another one that's kind of like interesting that we planted is this myoga ginger. And this is one of the cold hardy gingers. Now, you don't eat the root, but you'll eat the flower. And the flower is considered more of a delicacy. There is no flower here now, but the flowers come up towards the base, and they're often used in Asian cuisine for pickling. So I thought that would be kind of a cool plant, but I think it's one of those plants that until I start really doing the culinary arts here again, I probably won't be using it as much. So could I have used that space for more asparagus? Yeah, probably. Over here though, now I'm glad to see that these haven't gotten eaten this year, because last year these tops got eaten off, and I don't know if it was by our groundhogs or if it was by our deer, but this is our sunchokes. So this is another type of Asteraceae, and this is one that you will collect. Jerusalem artichokes is another common name for it. This is another one that you'll collect by the root, and another plant that could really take over your garden. So just keep in mind that if you want to contain some of your plants, like mint's a great example. Mint will totally take over your garden if you don't really contain it. I planted a lot of mint out in the orchard because I'm totally happy with it kind of taking over a lot of that space and even moving into some of the wild spaces. Over here you can see I have a variegated myoga ginger. I might as well just point that out. And that one obviously is not as productive as the pure green one. And I think that's really common for anybody who has houseplants, who really likes variegated plants, or even variegated plants in the landscape. Oftentimes some of those variegated plants will revert back to green if they haven't been meddled with, but they usually don't produce. So I think that's kind of more of a novelty plant than it is something that like I'm gonna be producing food kind of plant. So let's hop over to our gazebo garden, which was always designed as like a little community garden where you could quickly go and pick some lettuce and stuff like that. So I feel like it's my duty to report that this area is not finished by the stonemasons, and I want to point out how weedy it is. This is basically pure stone, and you can see the grass kind of pushing in here. Eventually this area is going to be large pads of stone just for walking areas, but things will seed in here quite readily. So I'm kind of glad this is a little bit more raised up. Earlier in the year, just like the raised beds that I showed you, I came out and topped this up with some more compost and soil. You could see that there's some areas that get really low. I mean, this is now 4 to 5 inches down, but this is a chipmunk hole right here. So I've kind of pushed the plants back so that the chipmunk doesn't bother the roots. Typically, oftentimes they'll go right where you kind of planted the roots of the plant. So I've often popped plants out, but you can see we have some strawberries in here. We basically had to come out every single morning to get the strawberries early in the morning to make sure that the animals didn't eat them. And I'm trying to finesse this place to actually grow plants that our wild creatures don't eat back here. And that's just trial and error, really, because I planted a lot of different types of plants last year. And we have these cloches, which really help. So obviously lettuce, a lot of this lettuce is actually going to flower right now. So it'll be a much bitter green. So this is an incredible producer. I'll have to get you the cultivated name of this, but this lettuce with like red splotches on, incredible producer. We've been picking off of this for months now, and I could probably plant some more right now and have it start to leaf out, and so that we'd have it through the summer and the fall. This red oak leaf has been a really good producer. We have some kale in here. Obviously, this has been eaten, and this only happened relatively recently, so I think it's probably because I left and I wasn't feeding my animals peanuts anymore, and they came over to my garden. They're like, I'm gonna nibble on this. So this is always meant to be kind of like more of our communal garden where, you know, it's really outside the kitchen of the common house. You can come out here, grab some lettuce leaves in order to make a salad, maybe some tomatoes, things like that. I've planted a lot of calendula. So that's what this plant is, and I planted that last year as well. Nobody seems to eat it except the pollinators absolutely adore it, and I've been cutting on it. So these cuts are actually from me, and I'm cutting on it to make a salve. So, and this is actually another good time to plant up the calendula. You could plant it up in like late summer and fall again, and you'll get a second crop. And usually it's a more vigorous crop than the one that you planted in the springtime, although this has been a great vigorous crop. And I like planting some of the flowers in with the veggies. Now this is Ceonanthus. We have two here, and I have that one under a cloche because I wasn't sure whether our animals would eat this. And this is red root. So this is also another really great medicinal. It's a lymphatic herb. So again, growing that in with some of the vegetables, I think it just is a great idea. I think they're nice companion plantings. Now this is one of our like kind of bib lettuces, and we use this recently to make a dish. It's going to flower now. So again, if we're not out here every day and not picking off this stuff, a lot of this stuff I'd have to give this to the chickens if I had chickens, you know, and they would absolutely adore this. But we only planted, I would say maybe a dozen head of lettuce, and it was totally way more than what we could eat, you know, unless we were eating salad all day long for 3 meals a day. But if we were just having salad for once a day, which is, you know, normal for us, this was more than what we could use. So that was great. I wasn't planning on planting tomatoes this year, and actually didn't even have any tomato cages, but I, you know, picked up some of my flower cages and I just kind of stuffed them in there. And these are great. I just was here yesterday and I picked off like 3 or 4 of these. So these little cherry tomatoes are ripening up really nicely. And surprisingly, the animals have not messed with these. So some more tomatoes over here. Again, these were kind of growing all over the place and I didn't have them caged up, so they have some real weird growth forms. This one probably has, I could probably come in here and cut off some of the leaves that don't have flowers on just to give some airflow, but I've picked up off a couple tomatoes here. And then this is something interesting that I want to share with you. This is our red sorrel. This is, I had no idea that this was related to our curly docks, our rumex. And I didn't really realize that until I looked at the flower spikes. So this is obviously going to seed. And, you know, here we really battle curly dock. It's an incredibly invasive plant that, you know, we don't really enjoy. Here's a little honeysuckle growing up here and some grass leaves. Take out. Right there, so you can see what they look like. That's one of our Japanese honeysuckles, which is an invasive. So like a bird will probably come in, poop out a berry, and then that would germinate. Anyway, so this is, I wouldn't eat this now. You know, it's gone to seed. Earlier in the year, it gets these nice kind of leaves that look like this, and they have these red veins. Nothing seems to touch this plant, which is great because It's, you know, used as a salad green, or you could saute it like spinach, wilt it like a spinach, and it's got a tang to it. But if you get them really early, or even as microgreens, it's just perfect. And I wasn't expecting this to come back, but it is a perennial here, which is amazing. Now I left some parsnips over winter. I guess I never had collected them last year. And this is what you're seeing. They're kind of wildizing the parsnips here. And typically you would want to collect the parsnip after a frost, because that's when the parsnip gets like really sweet. So, you know, it's for people who don't know what a parsnip is, it's kind of almost like a carrot, but it's like a thicker white carrot and has a little less maybe sweetness than a carrot. So these popped up. I collected some of the seed as well, so that was really nice. What you're seeing here is Barago borage, and I'll show you some of the ones that are blooming over there. I thought these were great plants. The bumblebees really love it. So if you're trying to bring pollinators into your garden, obviously bringing plants that have pollinator potential. And then you could use the borage flowers as decoration in salads. They're edible. So I always kind of feel some struggles with, like, if I see a lot of bumbles or bees on it, I'm like, oh, leave it for the bees. But then sometimes I'll pick like one or two. Like the calendula flowers, I'll never cut all of them all at once. I'll cut like maybe a third, dry them, then put them away, come back out, cut about a third. So here you can see some of the red lettuce leaves that we have growing here that miraculously have not been touched. But again, I think some of the red lettuce is not touched as much as maybe the green lettuce. Now under that cloche, I'll be coming around to you. These are some of our green beans, which are kind of cool. I came out the other day before I left and I picked some, so you could see some growing. I got a nice little crop of these, and these are bush beans. So my idea here was to not grow vines up in the raised bed, but to grow more like bush peas, bush beans, because I just think it's a little bit more sensible on the type of space that we have here. Unfortunately, I had like blanched them and I had undercooked the green beans. We ate them anyway, but I got a little excited because it was our first crop in the year. Another great native plant here, and I am going to be growing this year over year. This is Physalis virginiana. This is a little underripe, but this is our ground cherry. It actually wasn't that bad. So you can see all the little ground cherries here. Typically when these little things become a little yellow, that's when these little packets, that's when they're ripe enough to pick. Look at the little flowers right here. So part of the reason why I also planted this is, I believe, if I could remember correctly, that this is a specialist pollinator plant for some of our native bees. Look at that cute flower. You normally wouldn't see that kind of color. It's like a very soft lemony yellow with like a butter yellow with the purple centers. So great plant. It's kind of growing. I love how it's even just the way that it's growing kind of over the tops of the, like almost like a ground cover, but over the tops of the stone. So I am going to plant more of this. I thought I'd plant 3 of them. Oh, here's one. Looks like it kind of didn't really take as much as this one did. But this is a perennial. It'll grow back year over year. It doesn't seem like the animals bother this, and maybe it's also because the fruit is underneath and in that little packet. So maybe the animals don't understand what that is. But I use these in our salads. In fact, like I made a salad, you probably wouldn't have noticed it, but I put like maybe a half a dozen in there, cut them in half and put it in our salad. It has a nice like kind of very unique flavor to it, almost like a little soury. Definitely feels a little bit more like a tomato, but is a bit sour. Green zucchini, now this one is a beast. This one's way too big. I'm gonna have to pick this off. This is like the size of the zucchini that my mom likes to use when making zucchini bread. This is huge. Typically I would pick them like a little bit bigger than this. So maybe if I wait like 2 or 3 days, I would then pick this. But I wanted to plant some squash because our squash also has, squash is considered a specialist pollinator plant for some of our native bees. And this is some of the summer squash, obviously, that we have. So, and these get to be beasts, so I don't plant much else around it. This is Damascena, this is Nigella. So I'll show you the seed heads of this. So the flowers, I don't know if the flowers are edible or not. The flowers are so beautiful. I love the feathery, wispy nature of this. Very easy to seed. I just kind of throw the seeds in here and sprinkle them about. And the seeds are edible. So in fact, one of my friends, Mohammed, said that in his home country, he uses a lot on meats. And we have Nigella. I love the kind of taste of them, like really nice crispy black seeds. This looks like a bush pea. I don't know, I don't think I collected anything from this already. This is a piece of weed coming through here, but oh yeah, so here you can see the peas in here. I actually didn't come out and collect these. So you can see that, again, these are gardens that we don't, surprisingly, you think, you know, the first gardens that a lot of folks will put in are the food gardens so that they can collect the food for themselves. And it's like almost the complete opposite for us, because we've been so busy with the renovation and looking at the larger landscape that these gardens tend to get pushed to the side. And it took a long time to actually finish the raised beds here. And we want something that seems a bit more permanent. And like I said, these aren't even finished, but I went ahead and started planting these. And again, we've used our squashes this season, the physalis, virginiana, the tomatoes, the lettuce, so the calendula. So we're collecting quite a bit. Oh, look at this, was like somebody ate those are the wings of one of our grasshoppers. Somebody ate that guy. So we have, oh yeah, that guy. So this is our rosemary. So this is a prostrate rosemary. This I have to plant year over year. I don't take this in, and it's, but I love the structure of this one. So if you want to have a rosemary that's hardy to this zone, so we have a zone 5-6 here, just to give it into perspective, a USDA zone 5-6. Rosemary ARP is probably one of the best cultivated varieties that will grow year over year. We'll die back to the roots, but it'll grow back. And this one is a prostrate rosemary. And again, my idea was to just have this kind of flooding over the side, and that's exactly what's happening here. Now this one I got from Plant Delights, and this is Conradina verticillata rocky top. And I thought this was a cool one to plant right next to the rosemary because it looks and smells very similar. So I don't know if, I have not used that one in any kind of dishes, and I'm not sure if it's edible, but I thought planting them right next to one another would be kind of like a cheeky little thing to do. One of the other things that I saw when we did a Plant Delights nursery tour was this sea kale. Now, as you could see, this is quite a hardy plant. It almost feels like cabbage and kale came together. I love the color of this. It reminds me of a lot of the color of the gazebo and the blue nature of some of this flagstone, this blue stone that we have here. And he had said on our tour, yeah, this is edible. So I think this, I have eaten this, but you want to eat it when it's a little smaller earlier in the season. And then I think this would probably be fine steamed. And he had mentioned that it needs a really well draining medium. So I planted one here and I planted one right here on the edge in this kind of stone. And you could see which one is doing better. So oftentimes I'll do that. I'll like go and plant a couple crops in different areas and just see what does better. This is also a perennial. So I'm showing you, I mean, the squash is not a perennial, but I'm showing you a lot of perennials in this garden. And these are going to come back year over year, and they're probably going to get bigger and bigger year over year. Here's another squash. This might be, let's see what it is, another zucchini. So that's kind of growing up here. And this is arugula. And I find arugula to be excellent even after the bloom and when it goes into seed. It has still that kind of spicy little flavor. And it is a plant that No one seems to eat around here. Like none of the animals come and eat it. And it might be because I picked the cultivated varieties that are really spicy. Now, I love growing this. And, you know, we pick it for sandwiches, for salads. And also, I found that my diamond doves really love arugula. So every morning, I'll come out here, pick like 5 or 6 different leaves because they're so small, that's all they eat. And then I'll have them, I'll like rip it up for them, tear it up for them so that they could eat that. So great growing arugula, and I collect the seeds and I plant it every year. So perfect. Tulsi basil, so this has obviously gone to flower, and I'll be able to collect the seed. This is not hardy, but Tulsi is, I mean, the smell of this is like bubble gum, mint bubble gum or something. It's so sweet and incredible medicinal, very important Ayurvedic herb. So we choose to grow that regularly. Now these are some more tomatoes that I recently planted, and when I was cutting off the kind of side branches of those tomatoes because they were so beastly, I just basically stuck them into the ground. And so I just created like all these different cuttings of those tomatoes. And I did eventually invest in some tomato cages that I went on gardeners.com, which is a great employee-owned business, and you know, got some of these just to kind of cage them in early on. Here's one of our zucchinis kind of growing. You can see how I could potentially trellis this up. Now, this is a different kind of calendula. So I'm not growing, I'm going to get some seeds of calendula resina, which is the calendula officinalis, which is the one that's typically made, but I'll make these into medicine as well. But look at this peachy color calendula with the nigella. So this is called Love in a Mist, which I told you those flowers are just phenomenal. And look at these little feathery bracts. I mean, look at that plant. So those colors in here, are just beautiful. I will be getting some Asclepias tuberosa. That's our pleurisy root. It's a type of milkweed. I don't think any animal is going to eat that, like knock on stone, but also a really rich, vibrant orange flower. So I think it's going to look really nice from an aesthetic standpoint with our calendula, which again is a medicinal pleurisy root. A medicinal, you'll use the root of it, as you could tell from pleurisy root, also known as butterfly weed. Here's another green bean. Like I'm going to have to come out here and pick these green beans. Look at that. So, and then there's look at these green beans. We're gonna have such a feast tonight. There's one of our native bees in there on the calendula, which is amazing. Look at that guy, it looks like a type of sweat bee. Yeah, look at these green beans, so good. And then we have some of that ceanothus in the back as well, but again, I probably don't need to put that under here because it doesn't seem like the animals touch it. And again, that's like some of the experiment. Oh, I've just skipped by something. This one, next to this grass, this is also a great medicinal. This is licorice. That's our native licorice. So we have a native licorice that is in the Fabaceae family. So it's nitrogen fixing. And it's not maybe as powerful as the Chinese licorice, but it could still be used in that kind of capacity. And I have, between this and the physalis, I have that growing in our orchard because they're native plants, so why not let them grow out in the wild? But here I have some of the licorice as well. I saw it growing extremely well in the orchard, so decided to grow that here as well. Ooh, I'm stepping on all these plants that I planted over here. This is lemongrass. So for those who like lemongrass tea, that's why I have that growing there. You might say, oh, that looks like a big weed, but it doesn't like spread out. It's more clump forming. And again, these are some of the cuttings that I took off of the other plants. And I only came out here and watered these maybe 3 or 4 times. So I think some folks ask like whether I irrigate my gardens. This has been a fairly good year of rainfall. And I have not come out here and watered these aside from the fact that, you know, I just wanted to root them up. And so I came out here and, you know, poured some water on them, but didn't come out here otherwise. Now, Love in a Mist, this is the nigella. This is the seed heads, which I think are just so attractive. I mean, look, a really popular cottage garden plant. So when these start to go to seed, I'll be able to collect these seeds and use that as a, a spice. Here's the borage. So you can see here the flowers right there. So again, you could collect these as like little edible flowers. And these do kind of get a little beastly, but I don't mind. They play really nicely well with the lettuce. So you can see we cut the lettuce off pretty good here. So we collected a lot of that. And it's in with the strawberries, which obviously produce really early in the season. So growing in between the strawberries is not a bad deal. And then I have some lettuce under these cloches over here and some more green beans that I'll have to come in and collect. So in here, I might as well show you some of the stuff. So this was our Lonicera Kinsley's Ghost, a nice kind of flowering plant. And I had our rose here, if you remember, the Saunders White Rambler. And the Saunders White Rambler doesn't really pick up and start to flower until like July, late like July. And this is already getting going. So I took the White Rambler and I planted it now in front of the meadow house on our fence, now that we have a new fence there. And I just got a second Kinsley's Ghost. And I think that, over a couple of years, these will start to grow up. And then I've planted other types of plants in here. So again, this is like one of our peas. This is a clematis that's kind of growing up, except this is a bushier clematis. I think I probably should have picked a clematis that is a bit more twining. So I might have to swap this one out. And then over here, I kind of went crazy. I planted some peas over here, and then I'll have to come out and wrap this hops up. So this is a hops, Humulus lupulus, which is a great host plant for some of our butterflies, like the question mark and the comma butterflies. And then the other one I have in here, which is just starting, is our Schisandra. So this is its fruits end up becoming like a 5-flavored fruit, and it will grow up. It will get kind of woody. So I have that one kind of growing up here as like these are permanent vines except for the peas and beans. And then I'll have to come in here once this is finished and we get like the stone down on the ground. I'll have to see what we're gonna let grow up here, because this yarrow has come up, this Achillea millefolium. Obviously not something I planted, but is prevalent in the landscape. And this again is an incredible medicinal. So this is, if you ever like get cut, say you cut yourself back here, and you could just chew up some of these leaves and put it on as like a poultice to stop the bleeding. So it's been used as a styptic, or to help stop if you're hemorrhaging on the inside, taking a tincture of Achillea. So this is a plant that I've talked about in the past on some of my herbals. So I kind of, again, have to, see what pops up and say, hey, this is something I'd like to have here. Or if I don't want it there, how can I, go into the earth and like maybe pop it out and put it somewhere else. And this is just incredibly weedy. So until we kind of deal with this, I'll just be focusing on this. We just come in here and usually mow it, with the exception of like our St. John's wort here. So this is Hypericum perfolatum. There's another one over here that I left open, and I've been collecting this to make some of our native oils. So this one gets that bright red oil. I've talked about that in the past as well, and that's a great use of like salves, especially if you get like burns or superficial cuts. That's an incredible plant. So I'm making a couple different vats of that. Here's the other one. So I've been cutting on this one. And again, I don't typically cut all the flowers off, because this is a great pollinator plant. And again, some of our native specialist pollinators use Hypericum. This one's Hypericum perforatum. And this is one of the ones that will give you a nice red salve. And so I'll cut off maybe a third of them. And I'm mindful, because you'll see all these little ones right here, right behind the flower, are ones that will start to grow again. So this will start to flower. So you got to be mindful, you only cut off this flower top, because if you cut off a whole bunch of them, then you cut off all these future flowers that have yet to bloom. So I'm always very surgical when it comes to chopping these off. But look at this, I mean, look at this, all the nigella that has hopped over here. Like, I didn't plant that in here. This is epilobium, this is willow herb. Got some obviously grasses, and then this one was one of the ones I planted that is just a beast. It loves growing on the stone. Cymbalaria, that one is. So yeah, so I mean, this needs some really hefty weeding, but you could see within the bed, it's part of the reason, it's part of the benefit of actually building raised beds is that you don't have to bend over. It's easier to weed. Obviously this is a great place for sitting as well and entertaining, but that's our little veggie garden. I think like maybe in 2 years, we'll be able to focus on building some raised beds in front of the barn. And then I don't know when we're gonna get around to like building the greenhouse off the side of the barn. After all, I mean, we're still renovating the barn. So that's gonna be a future episode. That'll probably be Saunders' episode. I'll toss that one to him. But thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed the tour. We'll keep plugging away at this garden and others here at Flock as the seasons unfold. And if you stay tuned, you'll get a look at our big barn renovation. And we'd like to extend a special thanks to our subscribers and also our members here at Flock who help support the channel. To find out more, go to our main page and click the join button. We'll see you in another episode.